It wasn't the sound that woke him. It was the stillness that came before it. Boone Thatcher had learned to listen to what the world wasn't saying. In winter, that meant the silence between snowflakes, the hush when a coyote changed its mind, the second before a man froze or begged or took his last breath. So when he stopped chopping wood and held the axe midair, it wasn't instinct, it was something older. The cabin behind him creaked faintly. But that wasn't it. The storm had quieted. But that wasn't it. It was a presence. A shift in the breath of the world. Then the knock came. Not loud. Not frantic. Just small. Boone lowered the axe and turned slowly, breath steaming in the bitter dawn air. Shirtless in the snow, muscles tense, he stepped toward the cabin, boots crunching across the crusted white ground. The chimney smoked lazily behind him. A shovel leaned at an odd angle by the threshold. He opened the door. They were there, two girls, no higher than his thigh, standing with their fists still raised to knock again. One wore a coat with no buttons. The other wore no coat at all. The taller one blinked up at him. Her cheeks were red, her hands raw and trembling. She had a scrap of red thread tied around her wrist. Her lip quivered, but her chin didn't drop. The younger one, silent, with tangled hair and bare feet pink as raw fish, just stared. She clutched something in her fist. A folded page. Neither of them cried. Boone didn't speak. Didn't move. The taller girl drew in a breath that looked too big for her chest. "Are you the cowboy who can find our mama?" Boone didn't answer. He only stepped aside. The girls passed him like ghosts, slow, cautious, one dragging the other by the wrist. He shut the door gently behind them. The wind, which hadn't howled before, now groaned against the logs like a held-back sob. Inside, the heat from the iron stove reached them slowly. Boone knelt by it and stoked the coals, letting the flames lick higher. He didn't ask them questions. He just laid a folded blanket by the fire and fetched 2 tin cups of warm molasses water. The girls sat, not speaking, not taking their eyes off him. He remembered once watching a fawn whose mother had been struck by a cart. It had stood there, not moving, even when wolves circled. This felt the same. After a time, he crouched beside them and placed the tin cups near their hands. Still they didn't move. "You got names?" he asked, voice like gravel under snow. The older one nodded. "Mama called me Birdie." "And her?" Birdie hesitated. "She don't talk much." The younger one's lips were chapped and bleeding. Her eyes didn't blink often. Boone reached for the kettle again, poured water into a basin, and set it beside the stove. "You girls come from town?" "No," Birdie said. "We came from nowhere." Boone let that answer settle. He knew the kind. Folks didn't run to nowhere. They ran from something. He gently pushed the basin forward. "Wash up. I'll find cornbread." The younger girl dipped her hands into the water first, as if the warmth might disappear if she didn't catch it in time. While they scrubbed, Boone opened the cupboard and cut slices of sweet cornbread, left over from the night before. The smell filled the cabin like mercy. Birdie looked at the bread and blinked hard. "Mama said to find the man with the scar." Boone paused. "Scar?" he echoed. She pointed toward his chest. His shirt still hung by the door. Cold air licked the space between his shoulder blades. He looked down. The scar wasn't large. Faint, faded now. A crooked line running down from his collarbone to his ribs. A wound from a mining collapse years ago. He'd forgotten it until now. Birdie held up the folded paper. He took it with rough fingers. It was a charcoal sketch. Woman's face, hastily drawn. A line of text beneath it. 4 words, scrawled in a child's hand. "Willa May needs help." Boone sat down hard on the bench near the stove. He knew the name. He hadn't spoken it in years. Willa May Carrigan. A girl from town who once sang too loud, danced too free, and carried a baby into church without a ring on her hand. Folks said she lied about the father. Said she was crazy. Said she ran off into the woods one stormy night and probably froze to death. Boone had stood on the porch as they turned her away. He'd wanted to stop them, wanted to step forward, but his feet hadn't moved. He'd never forgiven himself for that. Bertie broke a piece of cornbread in half and placed it into her sister's hand. The younger girl finally let her lip tremble. Her teeth bit into the bread like it hurt her to eat too fast. She said, "If we got lost, find the cowboy who didn't lie." Boone blinked slowly. Didn't lie. Bertie looked down. "Mama said most men say they'll come back. But you never said anything at all. You just watched." That hurt more than a bullet. Boone rubbed a hand over his mouth, the stubble catching on his palm. He hadn't expected to be seen. Not then. Not by her. And certainly not remembered by her children. Outside, the snowfall picked up again. Steady now. Soft, like a hush falling over the world. Bertie leaned against her sister, her eyelids fluttering. Boone pulled the spare quilts from the shelf and laid them by the fire. When the girls curled up together beneath them, he sat close but not too near. He watched them sleep for a long time. Their breathing settled the room. It felt like something fragile had come undone. He didn't know where Willa was. Didn't know if she was alive. But the paper in his hand said she had tried to send word. These girls had traveled alone. And she had remembered him. That mattered. Boone reached for the pot again and refilled the kettle. The stove ticked as the fire shifted. Wind tapped faintly at the glass. And then, just before sleep could claim the room entirely, Bertie's voice rose again, thin as string. "Mama said, if we find you, maybe we can be found too." Boone didn't speak. But he didn't look away this time. Boone harnessed the wagon at first light, though the snow hadn't stopped and the trail into town looked like nothing more than a white breath stretched thin between the hills. The air burned cold enough to sting the skin, but the girls never complained. Bertie held her sister in her lap beneath the buffalo hide, and when Boone looked back, he saw her lips moving, not in prayer, but in story. He remembered that look. Willa used to talk that way too, spinning tales not to escape the world, but to make it bearable. They crested the ridge as the first chimney smoke from town rose like gray arms asking something heaven couldn't answer. The place hadn't changed. Same crooked signs, same lopsided saloon, same sharp eyes behind curtains. Boone hated every board of it. As he drove the wagon into the edge of Main Street, faces turned. First from windows. Then from doors. A dog barked once and fell quiet. It wasn't the girls they stared at, it was him. Boone Thatcher, the man who hadn't been to church in 4 years. The man whose cabin sat too far up the hill for good company. He lifted Bertie down first. She wore Willa's shape already, spine straight even when her chin trembled. A woman outside the dry goods store whispered to her husband, "That the Carrigan girls?" Boone ignored it. He carried the younger one in his arms, her face tucked into his chest, her hands stiff from cold and silence. Her little head barely reached his collarbone. He headed toward the only place he thought might have warmth, the preacher's widow, Miss Emmeline Hodge, who once brought Willa biscuits the day before they cast her out. The widow opened the door halfway, dressed in full mourning black though her husband had been gone 6 winters now. "Boone Thatcher," she said like it was a curse. Her eyes slid to the girls. "What have you done?" "I found them near frozen on my porch," he said. "They're Willa Mays." The widow crossed her arms. "Then best take them where sin begets its own shelter. These girls don't belong here." "They belong alive," Boone said quietly. Miss Emmeline's lips thinned, but she opened the door wide enough for the girls to step inside. They stood awkwardly on the mat, Bertie squeezing her sister's hand like it was the last rope to shore. "I just need someone to watch them while I ask some questions," Boone said. "They don't talk much, but they remember enough." "You're dragging up ghosts," Emmeline muttered. "Let the dead stay buried." Boone knelt to Bertie's eye level. "You be brave." She nodded once. He stood. "I won't be long." As Boone walked away from the widow's porch, the snow thickened, falling in heavy sheets. It didn't howl. It settled. Like ash over something smoldering. At the sheriff's office, the door was already open. Sheriff Hal Dobbs leaned back in his chair, boots crossed on the desk, stirring coffee with a toothpick. His badge looked dull, like even it didn't believe in him anymore. "Well, look who froze over," Dobbs said. Boone Thatcher come down off his mountain. Boone stepped inside. "I need to talk about Willa May." Dobbs's smile faded. "You forget something after all these years? She had children. She had lies." Boone's jaw twitched. "The girls found their way to me. One of 'em had this." He held out the charcoal drawing. Dobbs didn't reach for it. "I didn't ask if you'd look," Boone said. He dropped the paper on the desk. Dobbs stared at it like it might crawl. "You really think she's still alive?" "I think someone didn't want her to be." Dobbs stood, slow. He was older now, thicker around the gut, but something in his eyes stayed sharp, like rusted nails. "Willa May was trouble," he said. "You remember what she did? Waltzed into town with some baby belly, talking about being mistreated, lied about who sired it, and stirred good folks into feeling sorry. I put a stop to that. You shamed her in front of the church. She came with shame." Boone's voice dropped. "She came asking for help." Dobbs stepped closer, breath sour with whiskey already. "She vanished on her own. That's what wild women do." Boone didn't flinch. "Then why do her girls have frostbite and memories of being chased?" Dobbs didn't answer. Boone stepped back, turned to go. Dobbs said, "You taking them girls in now? Ain't that rich? A man who let her walk out now wants her kids." Boone paused at the door. "I let her walk out once. I won't let her daughters freeze for it." Outside, snow coated the porch and the road. Boone walked slow, each footfall deliberate. He passed the church where Willa had stood alone years ago in her faded blue dress, stomach round with life, shame coiled around her like winter wind. He'd been there. He'd stood in the back, jaw tight, hands in his coat pockets, while Sheriff Dobbs declared her a liar, and the preacher turned his back. Boone hadn't said a word. That silence still lived in his bones. Back at the widow's house, he found Bertie in the corner with her arms around her sister, both wrapped in a too-thin quilt. The fire crackled low. Miss Emmeline offered him no tea, no smile. "They hungry?" he asked. "They'll say they're not," the widow replied. He crouched and lifted the younger girl again. She didn't resist. As they stepped outside, a few more townsfolk had gathered, their stares clinging like thorns. Someone murmured, "Ain't they Willa's?" Another replied, "Apple don't fall far." Boone didn't look back. He loaded the girls into the wagon and covered them again, tucking the hide under their feet. The horses breathed mist into the snow-thick air. Halfway back to the ridge, Bertie whispered, "She wasn't bad." Boone turned. "I know. She just got real quiet." He nodded once. "She said people don't like when you speak the truth too loud." Boone thought about that. About how the town never liked loud women, or kind men, or soft things that didn't break the way they wanted. He reached back and laid a hand on Bertie's shoulder. The sky began to darken early. Snow thickened, swirling now like a slow dance above the trees. By the time they reached the cabin, the fire inside had gone low. Boone fed it silently. The girls sat by it without speaking. Later, after soup and honeyed bread, Bertie uncurled from her blanket and crawled into Boone's lap. "Do you think she's really gone?" she asked. Boone looked into the fire. The flames looked tired. Not dying, just resting. "I don't know," he said. "But I think she tried to come back." Bertie nodded, slow. "She said if anything happened, go to the cowboy who didn't lie." Boone swallowed. He wanted to tell her she'd made a mistake, that he had lied, by saying nothing, by watching, by turning away. But he didn't. He just held her, gently, like he might hold a wound that didn't want to close. When she fell asleep, Boone eased her down beside her sister. He stood then, walked to the door, opened it. Outside, snow blanketed everything. The path, the trees, the trail back to town. A clean slate hiding all the tracks. And there, just beyond the porch, half buried in drift. A child's boot. Worn leather. Too small. And beside it, a second. Not one of the girls. Boone bent down, brushing snow away. Carved into the frozen earth beneath it, in the faint scrape of a nail or knife, were 5 desperate letters. W-I-L-L-A. The morning after the boot was found, the wind changed. It didn't howl or shriek. It just shifted, like breath drawn in before something was spoken aloud. Boone saddled the dun mare at first light, his coat buttoned high, rifle strapped to his back, a canteen and stale biscuit tucked beneath the saddle flap. Bertie stood in the doorway, her fingers balled in the hem of her borrowed dress. "You gonna bring her back?" she asked, voice thin as frost. Boone met her eyes. "I'm gonna try." She stepped forward and slipped something into his coat pocket. "It's her thread. Mama said red means remember." He didn't speak, just nodded once and touched the brim of his hat, then turned and rode toward the trees, where the snow fell quieter, like it was listening. The trail was half memory, half ghost. Boone had come this way before, years back, when the snow was thinner and the guilt less weighty. Folks had said she went east, toward the old mine trail, maybe looking for a place nobody could find her. That winter had taken others, too. But she was the only one no one looked for. He followed the deer path up the ridge, boots crunching ice, mare snorting warm clouds into the air. Every branch held snow like cupped hands. Every shadow seemed to whisper her name. Around midday, he found what he hadn't known he was looking for. A splintered cabin, half caved in, tucked behind a thicket of frost-covered juniper. He tethered the mare, approached on foot. The silence wasn't empty. It was full of something held too long. Inside, the walls smelled of ash and old blood. A chair tipped on its side. A cracked bowl beneath it. A shawl nailed to the beam. He stepped over broken wood and glass, toward a low bench covered in straw. Scratched into the wall with the end of a nail. "They said I'm lost. But I know where I am. The girls must never come back here." Beneath it, smaller words. Fainter. He watched. He knew. Boone's breath caught. Not from cold. He stared at the words until they blurred, then dropped to his knees and pressed a hand to the floorboards. Something beneath them. A loose creak. He pried up the panel and found a bundle wrapped in oilcloth. Inside, 2 things. A baby's boot, and a page torn from the church register. Willa May Carrigan. Mother, unknown. Father, refused to say. But beneath that, in a rushed scrawl. "I told him. He said he'd fix it. Then he came back with rope." Boone rose slowly, the cloth trembling in his hands. Dobbs. It had to be. He backed out of the shack like it might collapse from knowing too much. Outside, the sky darkened with oncoming snow again. He mounted up, heart pounding, throat raw. The trail twisted west, toward the old ravine. It was said that cattle used to go missing there. Some men too. But Boone had stopped believing in accidents. A mile on, he found a second sign. A piece of red thread, snagged on the bark of a pine, fluttering like breath. He stopped, dismounted, walked into the trees, and found it. The coat. Willa's coat. Faded blue, torn at the hem, half buried beneath ice, caught on a root. He pulled it free gently, like waking something that had slept too long. Inside the pocket, another drawing. This one not of a face, but of a house. Boone's house. With 2 girls drawn beside it, holding hands. A third figure stood in the distance. Hair loose. Arms open. His name written in shaky letters beneath. "He'll keep them warm." Boone stood there a long time, the wind lifting snow from the branches like ash from a fire long dead. He turned back, not to the road, but toward justice. By dusk, he reached his cabin again. The windows glowed. Smoke rose steady. Inside, the girls waited with the neighbor boy, Joel, a kind 12-year-old whose mother let him help when she could. Boone stepped in, snow dusting his coat, and pulled off his gloves slow. Bertie ran to him, burying her face in his coat. "You found her." "Not yet," he said. "But I know who to ask." That night, he sat by the fire long after the girls fell asleep, coat across his lap, page open on the table. He didn't write, didn't speak, just sat with the weight of knowing. The next morning, the church bell rang for no one. He walked into town like a man who'd finally stopped running from something, carrying the coat over his arm. Every step on the icy planks echoed too loud. The townsfolk watched. Again. Always watching. He passed the mercantile, the blacksmith, the barber who never trimmed truth too close. When he reached the sheriff's office, he didn't knock. Dobbs was there, same desk, same slouch. The smell of cigar smoke curled through the air. "You forget how doors work, Thatcher?" Boone set the coat on the desk. Dobbs looked at it, stiffened. "Where'd you get that?" he asked. "She left it near the ravine, not far from the place you brought her." Dobbs stood. "You best watch your tongue. She carved your name in the beam, said you promised to help, said you came back with rope." Dobbs reached for his belt, where his revolver rested. Boone's voice didn't rise. "Go ahead. But they'll see this time. All of them." Outside, a small crowd had gathered. Word traveled fast when shame smelled fresh. Dobbs hesitated. Boone stepped forward. "You didn't kill her, did you?" Dobbs flinched. "You just made sure no one came looking." Silence. Then, "She wasn't right. Always talkin' like she mattered." "She did." Dobbs scoffed. "You didn't think so when she begged at the church." Boone's jaw clenched. "That's my sin, and I carry it." Dobbs looked away. Boone leaned in. "But you built yours on rope and silence." He turned and walked out before Dobbs could find an excuse for violence. He didn't need to. The town had already heard. At the cabin that evening, the girls ate quiet, their little hands working through biscuits and honey like they hadn't eaten in days. Boone sat at the table, watching them, the coat now hung by the fire. Joel sat on the floor carving a piece of driftwood into something that looked like a horse. Or maybe hope. Bertie looked up after a while. "Did she go to heaven?" Boone set down his cup. "I don't know. She said if she didn't make it back, we'd still find her. Somewhere." Boone didn't speak. "She said love ain't a place. It's what keeps you going." Outside, the snow had started again. Later, when the girls were asleep, Boone stepped out onto the porch. He stared at the trail, and saw something. A shape. Far off. A figure. Walking slow. Limping. Shawl dragging behind. Snow clinging to every fold. He didn't move. Not yet. He just watched, breath fogging the night. Then he stepped down from the porch, and walked toward her. She wasn't a ghost, though for a breath Boone thought she might be. The figure moved through the snow like someone wading through time. Shawl soaked. Hair stuck to her cheeks. One boot missing. One arm cradled like it had forgotten how to move. Her face was cracked with windburn, eyes wide and unsure, like a deer walking into its own story too late. Boone walked toward her without a word. The silence between them was heavier than speech. Willa May didn't stop until she was close enough to see the scar on his chest again. She smiled then, tired, cracked, unsure. "You remembered," she whispered. "No," he said softly. "They did." Her knees buckled. He caught her before she hit the snow, arms firm around her weightless body. She smelled like ash and cedar bark, like a winter that had waited too long for spring. He carried her inside, quiet, careful, like she might break open if jolted. The girls were asleep. Joel looked up from the floor, eyes wide. Then he nodded once and slipped out the door like a ghost trained to disappear when miracles came through. Boone laid Willa on the cot by the fire and knelt beside her. He touched her face, just once, and she closed her eyes like it gave her permission to rest. In the dim glow, he could see it all, the bruises along her ribs, the rope burns on her wrists, the thinness of someone who hadn't eaten for days. But she wasn't broken. She'd stayed alive. For them. She woke near midnight. I followed their tracks, she said, voice raw. I thought I was behind them. But I was chasing ghosts. You weren't far. She looked toward the bed where her daughters slept, curled together like kittens. Her lip trembled, but she didn't cry. I told them to find you, she said. Because you saw me that day. Even if you didn't speak. I should've, he said. She looked at him. You didn't shame me. You just didn't stop them. Boone bowed his head. Then I will now. The next day, the cabin came alive. Boone cooked eggs while the girls clung to their mother like shadows. Birdie kept asking what her favorite color was. The younger one, still silent, kept brushing Willa's hair with her tiny hands as if needing proof it was real. Willa barely ate. But she watched. Watched her daughters breathe, laugh, live. Outside, word spread fast. Some said she was a ghost. Others said Boone had gone mad and dragged up the past. But Emmeline came first, basket in hand. She didn't enter. Just stood on the porch and said, "You need tea." Boone took it without speaking. Then came Reverend Mallory. Then the blacksmith's wife. By dusk, the whole town had remembered they were human again. But the sheriff did not come. That night, Boone took Willa's hand and laid something in her palm. It was the red thread. Her fingers curled around it like a vow. "I can't stay hidden," she whispered. "Not forever." "Then don't," he said. "Stay seen." She smiled at him. Soft, slow. The kind that meant nothing and everything. The next morning, Boone rode into town. He didn't knock this time, either. Sheriff Dobbs looked up from his desk like he'd been expecting a storm and found a reckoning instead. "You've got a lot of nerve," he muttered. "She's back," Boone said. Dobbs stood. "That's her problem." "No, it's yours." Dobbs walked around the desk, hand near his holster. "You think this changes anything? She's still a liar. A temptress." "She survived," Boone cut in. "You left her to die. You can't prove." "I don't need to. They remember." Dobbs blinked. Boone stepped closer. "This town's tired of your kind of silence. You'll step down. Or I'll make sure every name Willa carved on that beam is read aloud on Sunday." Dobbs's breath hitched. "You don't want to be remembered that way," Boone said. The sheriff didn't answer, but his hand moved away from the gun. Boone turned. This time, no one stopped him. When he returned, the girls were painting pine cones with Joel, their laughter soft and bright. Willa stood on the porch, wind in her hair, eyes full of something like peace. He stopped a few paces away. She looked at him. "Well, he won't bother you again." She nodded, said nothing more. Instead, she walked down the steps and handed him a folded piece of paper. It was a drawing, crude, childlike, but he recognized it. The girls, standing beneath a sign, Thatcher and Daughters. He stared at it too long. Then, without speaking, he opened the door. And this time, she stepped through first. Later, when the fire had dimmed and the world was still, Birdie whispered from the bed, "Mama." Willa stroked her hair. "Yes, baby. You gonna leave again?" "No," she said. "I just needed time." Birdie blinked. "To come back." Willa kissed her forehead. "To become someone worth returning to." Outside, snow fell slow and steady, painting the world white again. And inside, a scarred man, a strong woman, and two little girls finally slept with the door unlocked. Some doors stay open not because someone knocked, but because someone waited. Waited through shame, through snow, through silence. And sometimes, the bravest thing a person can do is walk through it again, carrying only what love refused to leave behind. Which city are you watching our video from? Please leave a comment. Please subscribe to the channel as well. Thank you.